prank earlier. Anyways, my name is William Brower, and for myself, I've actually been a author for a little bit over 10 years, but I've been writing for close to 30. And I ended up breaking into writing more out of an opportunity. So, almost the traditional starving artist factor. When I was in the 6th grade, my English class had a little bit of a contest that was going on. And it was for Halloween, and whoever can write the scariest story would win a grand prize, which would be a weekend pass and also a pizza at the local pizza restaurant. So, weekend pass would include a gift certificate to the movie theater next door to the pizza joint. Well, at that time, the movie Hellraiser was just going to be opening up that weekend, and being as young as that I was, even with my allowance, I wouldn't be able to afford the movie ticket. So I decided to sit down and take a crack at writing. And for myself, I've always been a history buff, and no matter what I'm working on, I always incorporate history in some way, shape, or form into the project. So my first story actually was a park ranger who ends up witnessing the Battle of Gettysburg, but all done with phantoms. And in the end, also likewise, winds up with post-traumatic stress disorder. I won the grand prize, but unfortunately, because of how realistic I made the battle sequences, the story would not be able to be published in the school newspaper. So instead, they put my name and then just listed me as young Stephen King, which was a name that stuck with me for the rest of my school years. And after school, I've pretty much went back to my love of history. And one of my primary areas of research has always been on the Titanic. And that has always opened up a lot of doors for me. For the public speaking avenue, I've had the opportunity of interviewing some of the remaining survivors, and I took some of their accounts to incorporate an interactive one-man play. And in later years, back in 1999, I was actually asked by the Broward Center for the Performing Arts to do my presentation, and that was in front of 10,000 people, which was my largest audience up to date. By 2000, I decided that I was going to go ahead and retire from doing the public speaking of Titanic. The movie had already come out, the interest was winding down, and let's face it, everybody was getting a little annoyed with hearing Celine Dion at every single radio station every 5 minutes.
Hear, hear.
So, instead, I decided to go with Plan B. And what I did was, I started to dig through some of my old journals that I used to write before I'd go to sleep during school. And I kind of realized that my buddies and I from all of our classes that grew up together, we did a lot of stupid things. And we took advantage of the joys of youth and everything else. And in the course of rereading it, I also kind of reminded myself that it was a combination of both a threat and a promise that at the 10-year reunion, there would be a published book that would describe every single thing that we had done. And I would walk in with the book and say, "Oh, hi, it's nice to meet you. Oh, it's really good to meet you. Would you like to know what your husband was like? Sure, go to page 4. Little did I know that little stunt within itself would open up some other doors and venues in future areas. However, getting the first book out was a challenge. And in my case, it wasn't because of anything in terms of legal issues or trying to find the right people to market it. I put it out myself, but the problem was, as I got further and further towards the publication date, I started getting phone calls from all of my old friends. And they were all gung-ho about the fact that they were going to be immortalized in print. I mean, what better way to have a big compliment such as that? Unfortunately, was life itself had a little bit of a sense of humor. So my one friend called me up and let me know that at the time of publication, he was actually just been sought out by the Minnesota Vikings. So I was like, oh, that's great. So let's take off your last name and we'll go ahead and work it from there and see what happens. So I ended up having to drop everybody's last name, and then when I put out a preliminary notice among some of the people in my Titanic realm and research that I was going to be doing some little bit of a trip down memory lane in high school memoirs, a lot of them, as conservative as they are, were not very impressed. So that's when I decided at that moment that I would have to go ahead and assume an alias. So I came up with the most ingenious of names, and it was actually as a homage to a gentleman named Bob Kane, who had created Batman. And it's one of the comic books that I still love to this day. And one of the villains that he had created was a guy named the Riddler. And the Riddler actually has a real name, which was Edward Nigma, E-Nigma. And unfortunately, Bob Kane had passed away, and so as a last-minute gesture, just as a homage to him, I decided to create my own alias. So I came up with Philippe Erideau, a Frenchman from Nice, France. But if you take his first initial to the last name, you come up with the word paradox. And that within itself pretty much would explain what the first book entailed. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that we only broke the law once in 8 years. But and of course, of all things, it was a federal law. But like I say, there's a method to the madness. And in my case, what it was very simple. Most of us, as soon as we had our driver's license and were free and having our own cars, we used to always go down to South Beach and down to Miami and just enjoyed driving. Well, in August of 1992, Hurricane Andrew came through and wiped out almost all of Homestead. And so, within a few hours of the news broadcasting the damage and everything else in between, we decided to do this as a last-minute gesture. And within seconds of putting the idea out, the Red Cross, FEMA, the National Guard all automatically started to close off Dade County. So my friends and I took a van and we spray painted a Red Cross on the side of it and threw as much supplies and gear into it as possible and drove into a federal disaster zone. Thank God we got out when we did, because we ended up passing the National Guard, FEMA, and Red Cross on the way back. But it was always moments like that, though, that even within itself, it was history within the making. And that's one thing I always try to stress the most whenever I'm working on any of my projects, be it the nonfiction or even the fiction. So, that being said, out of 12 books that I have written in the past 10 years, I want to do one thing I've never had the chance to do until now, and that is to actually read from my first book. Now, right off the bat, I've had a few people that have questioned it because, the cover itself looks like it's a giant middle finger, and that's just because of the joy of Photoshop. In reality, it's actually the sign language for I love you, but you just crop it at just the right angle and looks can always be deceiving. And that was done intentionally, simply because of the fact that with the name of the book itself and what my friends and I entailed, we called ourselves the Crazy Clan. Not to be related to the Ku Klux Klan or any of those ones. Ours was more of a clan of brotherhood. Each of us, in some way, shape, or form, had their own specific learning disability. And what happened within that time frame was we found out the more students that the school can get into a special education program, the bigger the bonus check the guidance counselor would get. And a lot of us tried to, be as professional about it, even at our young age, and try to say that, we don't need this for the whole measure. Like for myself, when I was in 6th grade, my reading level was a third-year college, but my math level was a 2nd grader. So my guidance counselor put me into remedial reading and explained that if I wanted to take regular English, that they were going to use words I would not understand, and there would be lots of big sentences. So when we realized that they were not going to listen to us, we decided to kind of do exactly what helped to establish the United States. We rebelled. We used to order special effects movie props from a trade magazine called Fangora, and we used to throw outlandish pranks on the faculty members just to get the point across. And then as we got older, our stunts got a little bit dumber. We took over the school's television studio and switched the cue cards on the principal and realized that that's all done live without any censoring or editing. So, but even then, it was all, as much as the humor as there was, the underlying score behind it was just, it was us trying to find our own voices and our own selves. And even outside of, the stupidness at times, we always found ways to make sure that we would accomplish our own goals in life. Wherever one had a weakness, we always worked and paired with someone who had that strength in that same subject. So that way then, at the end of the day, we're always helping ourselves out, still having a laugh, and still loving life. And that's one of the most important and probably perhaps one of the most valuable things anyone can do. Now, I decided to go ahead and go with one of the lighter moments in the colored history that I was able to put out. And it's very simple. Just like perhaps some of you can understand as fellow authors, we have two sides to every coin. We have our name / author. When we're not doing the book signings and we're not writings, we have our name and ourselves in everyday life. For myself, I'm William Brower, the Titanic historian, and